Good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Karen Hamel, and I am a technical specialist, regulatory expert, and trainer for HalenHardy. I would like to welcome you all today, and this webinar is focusing on what you can do to help your employees with heat stress conditions and how you can create a plan that will help you to manage those conditions well. A couple of housekeeping items. First, we are recording this webinar, and we will make a recording of this available for everyone within the next 24 hours. And in that email, you will also have a link that you can request your certificate of attendance if you like those for your records. Also, we will be live streaming this through our YouTube channel. So if you have any problems with the Teams platform, you can pick it up there as well. So let's get started with some of our heat compliance regulations. This is an emphasis program that OSHA has coordinated for the current time period. There are currently about 12 programs that OSHA has in place for national emphasis, and heat stress happens to be one of those. So some of the background: currently there is no federal standard for heat illness. Heat illness is something that has been a focus. It's something that for decades OSHA has been looking at, but it is not currently something that has a standard like respiratory protection or hazard communication. They did publish a proposed rule in 2024, but with the change in administration, that rule did not see a final state. So it's something that, although there has been a proposal, there is not currently a federal heat illness prevention standard. There could be in the future, but as of this time, there is not. The proposal did have a lot of great provisions in it, and of course, it went through the process to become a proposed regulation, but at this time, no federal standard. There are, however, several states who have created state-level programs. So you can see from this map, there are 7 different states that have different types of requirements for heat illness standards within their jurisdictions. Some of them apply to indoor work, some of them apply to outdoor work, some apply to both. They all have provisions for employers to have a plan, but they are at that state level, and they've all got things that can be incorporated into your plans as well if you take a look at those and use those sort of as a template or a guideline when you're planning. And in addition to the states that do currently have legislation, Pennsylvania and Virginia are currently pursuing that. They don't have plans in place yet, but they are looking at those and creating state level legislation that would apply in those states. So a lot of different resources that you can use when you're looking at planning, a lot of things that you may be able to incorporate into your plans as you look at those for any plans that you may need to develop. So with the National Emphasis Program, currently OSHA has 12 different National Emphasis Programs, and the HEAT program is just one of those. It's one that they looked at before and has been a focus in previous years, but they renewed that focus. And with that, they provided a lot of guidance for their compliance inspectors. So the people who are coming around to different work sites, different organizations, and looking for compliance with programs. Again, they're not able to cite you under a specific standard for heat illness. However, they are able to enforce this under the general duty clause because they recognize heat stress and they recognize working in those high heat conditions as a known or a recognized hazard in the workplace. So when these compliance officers are coming out, they're looking for whether or not you have a plan, whether or not you have recognized the need for a heat stress plan, whether you've identified those conditions in your workplace, and whether you are making those provisions to minimize that hazard for your employees. And they're looking for their inspectors to go out on any day that it is above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which when you look at most summer conditions throughout the country, that's going to be applicable in most locations for those summer heat conditions to be when the heat index is above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So really pretty much any day is going to be fair game for them. And when they are out there looking to focus on what you're doing to provide cool water for people, to provide rest locations, to provide adequate rest for the amount of work that's being done. And they've also encouraged their inspectors that when they're looking for the places that they want to inspect, to stop along the way. So maybe they're going to company XYZ, but your work area is along the way. No reason why they couldn't stop and look for conditions there that might be impeding a workforce. So who are they targeting? They're looking at those industries that are more prone to have those high heat conditions. So there were about 42 targeted in a list. These are some of the highlighted ones that we feel might be more applicable to our client base. So looking at those contractors, people who are working outdoors, utility workers, people who have agricultural businesses, people who are working at sawmills, also looking indoors, so manufacturing, warehousing, automotive repair, those things where it may not be as easy as it is in other applications or in other situations to make it cool, make the area cool for workers to be in. So looking at those places that are not office environments. So any of those industries can be targeted. And just because your industry isn't targeted doesn't mean that those requirements or the need to assess high heat hazards isn't for your workplace. So don't let the list lure you into a false sense of security. Just like any other hazard that might be in your workplace, it still makes sense for you as an employer, as a supervisor, as a manager, to evaluate those conditions that may cause a high heat hazard. So with that in mind, what triggers this? What are we looking at when we're looking at having a heat program? OSHA uses heat index as a key criteria for determining whether or not you might have a heat hazard within your facility or within your organization. And that heat index is determined by two factors. The first is the temperature, and the second is the humidity. And those are combined to form the feels like temperature or the heat index temperature. And by combining those, it's important to recognize that because the air temperature isn't always the true story. Dry heat can feel a lot different than wet, humid heat. And when you're in dry heat, your body has the ability to evaporate sweat faster and help keep you cooler than it does when you're in a high humidity situation. So that's why they're using the heat index as opposed to just the air temperature when they're looking at triggers or looking at how to formulate your plan for the day based on that heat index. The heat index is something that was developed by NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, and the National Weather Service. And it was based on research that was done by Robert Sediment. He was an Australian researcher. And in 1979, he kind of put this index together, and it was based on temperature and humidity. And he also figured in things like clothing that would be worn and other environmental factors like wind speed or whether you were in full sun or a shaded area. And this is a chart that was developed and adopted by the National Weather Service as the heat index to help people understand how those two factors and how those different factors come together to impact what it actually feels like and how those temperatures are impacting worker health. And as you can see from the picture, as the heat and humidity go up and work together, you get those conditions where you need to take more caution, where it's dangerous to work, and where you really should consider whether or not it makes sense to be working. So when you get into those right conditions, is this really a necessary item? Can I put this task off? Can I do it at another time? What provisions am I going to need to make so that I don't have workers succumbing to heat stress? So that heat index, as I mentioned, designed for conditions where you do have light wind, designed for conditions where you may have some shade, and also mainly designed for outdoor conditions. So they're looking at working outdoors in the heat as opposed to working indoors where perhaps you're near an oven or near a furnace or near a machine that has a lot of radiant heat. So take that into consideration too when you are planning. What are your specific conditions? Do they really match what the intent of that heat index was designed for? And to help customers further, OSHA and NIOSH work together to develop a heat safety app. And the red sun that you see on the right side, that's the icon when you're looking at an app. So it's available for both Android and iPhone. So no matter what device you have, this is an app that is available. It's available at no cost. I really like it because it's something that as a supervisor or a manager, you can use to kind of forecast your day. You can say, okay, here are the conditions now. Here's what is forecast to be through the day. What do I need to do? How do I need to plan my day? How do I need to set up my breaks? Do I need to take additional breaks? Kind of helps you set the forecast for that. It's also something that you can use during your tailgates. Have all of your employees have it on their phones or on their devices as well. Something that you can all look at and say, okay, you know what? It's really going to get hot at lunchtime, which is kind of a common thing. So maybe when we want to do our harder work first, maybe we need to take more breaks. Maybe we're going to have a longer lunch and come back to this later. So it's kind of a nice tool for everybody involved in those high heat situations to really get a nice quick look at how their day could be shaping up. Another nice thing that I like about it is that it allows you to set reminders. So you can actually set it to really any interval that you want to say, okay, you know what? Every half hour, we're going to take a break. We're going to rest. We're going to hydrate. Every hour, we're going to do that. Whatever those conditions may be, you can set the alarms for it right within the app so that you don't really have to think about it. You're going to have that alarm go off and let you be reminded of something that you need to do. It also lists the signs and symptoms of different heat-related illnesses. So whether it's heat stress, heat stroke, heat rash, it kind of gives you those symptoms just as a reminder, things that you'll probably cover in training, you should cover in training, but you may need a reminder on, or something that, oh yeah, that is a symptom, that is a sign of a heat-related illness. And then of course the first aid measures as well. So when somebody is succumbing to one of those heat-related illnesses, what do I need to do right now to help that person? And of course, the reminders also to seek a medical attention in some of those situations. So really kind of a well-designed app, something that you can use at no cost, just as something that you're able to use on those daily planning activities, either as a supervisor or as an employee, to get you through the day a little more safely. Something else that you may hear of, let's go through action levels. So when OSHA had designed their guidance, they looked at different action levels and kind of used those sort of as a ballpark of where you might want to look when you're designing your program. So if you're tiering your program, of course, working at 80 degrees with 0% humidity is still hot. You still want to take precautions, but that's going to be a lot different than if the heat index is 103 or above. So looking at these are some of the guidance documents that OSHA created to help people when they are looking at creating their plans. If your heat index is less than 91 degrees, again, still warm, you still want to take precautions. Some of the things that you might want to do are ensure that your workers are acclimated to the situation. If you've got new workers who are coming into a situation, if you have people who have been on vacation for 2 or 3 weeks, they may need more time to acclimate. They may not be able to work with the same length of time or with the same speed or with the same endurance as somebody who's used to working at these higher temperatures and has been for a while. Making sure that you've got enough drinking water. We'll talk a little more about that when we're looking at planning, and making sure that you've got medical facilities available or medical services available. So do you have a way to communicate? Do you have a way to call 911 for emergency services? How long does it take you to get to the hospital? Having those plans in place so that you're acknowledging that, yes, it's still warm, but we're not really in those super dangerous situations yet. When the heat index is between 91 and 103 Fahrenheit, a little more precaution needs to be taken. So looking at, am I starting to mandate those breaks? Am I really watching my workers? Do I have a buddy system in place? Do I have a cool rest area? Am I providing shade? What additionally do I need to do to make sure that core temperatures aren't rising and people are still able to perform their work safely? And then, of course, as the heat index goes up, our precautions need to go up. So taking the time with those tailgate talks in the morning, maybe a talk at lunchtime, looking at, okay, are we all still good? Do we need longer breaks? Do we need to make this work wait? What do we need to do to keep people safe? What are those additional things that we need to do to watch our workers? What are we going to look for? Are we all good with the signs of heat stress? Taking those additional precautions to keep people safe. And then again, that additional level when the heat index is above 115. So this is that situation that could be almost immediately dangerous. Maybe we can only work for 5 minutes at a time. Maybe we just can't work at all. What are those situations? What are we going to do to make sure that the tasks that we need to get done can be done safely and we aren't subjecting anyone to those stressful heat conditions? So with those kind of in place, these are things that, again, OSHA has created those guidelines to kind of help employers, kind of help those supervisors, anybody who is creating or enforcing that plan, have sort of a role that they can begin to judge where they may need to be and what precautions they need to take. Another term that you may hear when you're talking about heat stress is wet bulb globe temperature. And this is one that NIOSH focuses on a lot. And this is sort of a different way to measure that heat index. And it uses 3 different bulbs to measure different things. So the dry bulb is going to measure ambient temperature, just like a thermometer would. The wet bulb, the way they describe it is evaporative cooling. So if you're kind of looking at a way to gauge that, that's sort of looking at your humidity. The higher the humidity, the slower you're going to be able to have a body cooling. So the drier the air is, the more evaporative cooling you have. So kind of like that heat index includes the humidity. That's sort of what the wet bulb is doing here. And the black globe is for measuring radiant heat. So you see these used a lot more when people are indoors. So if they're looking at the heat source near an oven or near a hot machine or near a whatever process might be generating heat, that black globe is going to help accommodate for that radiant heat that's going to be there. So this is something that we do see used. And it can certainly be used outdoors as well. Something that you may use when you're looking at how much heat asphalt is radiating, or you're laying asphalt, and of course you've got the radiant heat from that. So there are applications where this certainly could be used outdoors, but it's just a different way to measure the heat and the actual the field temperature that is there. So when you're looking at your plans, determine which one is going to be most applicable for your situation. Is heat index a good indicator for you, or do you need that wet bulb temperature? What is going to make the most sense based on the risks and the hazards that you've got within your workplace? So let's move into some planning elements. When you're looking at creating a plan, what do you need to do to make sure that that plan is adequate for your facility and is really going to help you with the hazards that you've got and help you reduce that risk? There is a lot of guidance out there. As I mentioned, OSHA's already got that guidance that we've sort of talked about already. They have sort of those action levels. They've got a lot more on their website that can help you. They have posters, they've got training tools, they've got educational materials in multiple languages. And they've got a lot that can really kind of walk you through the plan. NIOSH has done a lot of great research on this topic as well. And they have done research based on the amount of stress that the body is taking in different kinds of personal protective equipment. So that's really good research if you've got people who have to wear a lot of heavy protective clothing. So if you've got responders in turnout gear, if you're wearing FR material, clothing and gear, if you've got utility workers, they've studied athletes, they've done a lot of different things to really help you gauge the impact that different personal protective equipment. So whether you're wearing a respirator, what type of respirator you're wearing, all of those things can factor into what that real field temperature is like, or the amount of stress that you're adding to a worker by requiring a respirator. And again, that respirator is probably necessary if you're requiring it, but how does that impact their ability to work? How much does that add to the heat stress that they're feeling on their body? So when those conditions apply to you, take a look at that. It's a long read. It's something that certainly has gone into depth. It's written in a very scientific manner, but it can help to sort of flavor the things that you might need to put into your plan. The CDC has guidance. The military has a lot of research and a lot of different plans, provisions, policies that they use to help keep our armed forces safe. And National Athletic Training Association, they've done a lot of work with, of course, athletes and performing in those high heat conditions during different athletic events. So looking at short-term effects on workers, looking at those bursts of strength needed. Some of those things can be applicable to our work athletes. So a lot of different guidance. A lot of different trade organizations have also issued guidance for working in high heat conditions. So turn to those. Use those as resources when you're looking at your plans to help develop the one that's going to be best for your situation. So just like starting any plan, we're going to look for the risks and hazards that apply to us. And this is going to be different depending upon our different applications. The need for somebody in agriculture is going to be a lot different than for somebody in a steel foundry. So what are the specific risks and hazards that you're facing? Are you inside? Are you outside? Are you sitting near an oven all day? Are you digging a ditch? What are those things that are causing the high stress hazards and causing the heat to be a factor with those? And those are going to help you form the basis for the triggers in your plan and also any controls that you may need to take to help to mitigate those risks. So when you're doing that, be sure to make allowances for clothes, because especially personal protective equipment that may be hot, as I mentioned, like turnout gear or FR gear, those things can really, really add to heat stress for any individual that's working in them. So it's bad enough that it's 98 degrees with 80% humidity. Now I've added an FR coverall to that. That's really going to impact my ability to work, because it's going to trap heat. It's going to stay moist when I sweat. So those conditions are going to have a large impact on how I'm really feeling when I'm in that high heat situation. Am I able to continue sweating? Am I in a laminated suit that's really just kind of trapping that heat in there like a Ziploc bag? What are those things that are going to further complicate working in that high heat situation? Some of the other things to consider, we've mentioned before, is it the heat or is it the humidity? Is it both? Am I in the direct sun all day? Is there a wind blowing? Am I able to add some air movement to keep things moving and help create a better condition for my workers? These things are all going to play a role in your plans. And also some things that are a little harder to accommodate for, because we don't always know some of our health situations. We may be able to recognize that, hey, this is a young guy. He was a former quarterback on the high school team. He's in great condition, where I've got this other guy who's closer to retirement, maybe doesn't move as quickly as that quarterback does. Some of the things we can see, but other things we may not know. We may not know about heart conditions. We may not know about other conditions that can impact the way people perceive heat and the way people are able to accommodate for heat. A lot of medications are diuretics, and they can impact the way that workers are able to endure or embrace a high heat situation. So some things that we don't know, but they can in fact, have an impact on the way we need to plan our days. And hopefully we have those open lines of communication with our employees that they're able to discuss those things, and we're able to accommodate them on a case by case basis as needed. So some things that we can do to minimize risk, of course, we're always going to look at that hierarchy of risk and focusing on things that we can do to prevent. And we're going to look at a lot of those, starting with some engineering controls, because of course engineering controls are, if we can't prevent the hazard, of course we can't make it snow, but there are some things that we can do to at least help to make those situations more comfortable for our workers. So indoors, we can look at ways of increasing ventilation. We can look at drawing air from outdoors if that air happens to be cooler. We can look at moving air just to help with that evaporation, help keep that sweat drying on our bodies. But remember, when we're indoors, that when the temperature gets really high, if it's above 95 Fahrenheit, fans can actually accelerate our heat gain, and they can actually cause dehydration. So when we're looking at fan use or we're looking at ventilation, we really need to be mindful of that temperature and whether or not we're helping by moving that air, or if we're actually making it more of a hindrance. So can we get people to air conditioning? Is there air conditioning equipment available? Does it make sense to air condition? And a lot of times that's not the case. It's just not practical to air condition a warehouse, or it's not practical to air condition a manufacturing line where you're baking bread, whatever those cases may be. So a lot of times engineering controls, certainly we want to look at them, but they may not always be practical or possible for that situation. Outdoors, usually not as much as that we can do. We probably can't drag fans to all of our remote work sites, but what can we do to protect those workers? I recently was driving and I saw a utility repair, and they had pop-up tents set up above the utility area where they were making the repair, just to create that shielding, just to create that block against the direct sunlight. So these are inexpensive ways that we can help accommodate that, and things that we certainly can do to make those work areas more tolerable. Even if that's only during the breaks or only during rest times, we can still have that control in place or that control available. Administrative controls are probably where a bulk of your plan will lie. And these are things that we do to create policies, procedures, work practices, plans to accommodate those high conditions and allow the workers to continue that work as safely as possible. And we're going to look at some of these in sequence now. And the first one is acclimation. And acclimation is important because when you have somebody who is new to a situation, whether that be they're new to your workforce or they're new to the area, perhaps they have come from a different climate, or they've just come from a different area of your business and they're not used to being outdoors, whatever that situation may be. Acclimation is important because it helps to get the worker used to being in that higher heat situation gradually. Expecting a worker to be able to work full force in a high heat condition is just not reasonable. So there are a lot of guidelines out there, and these are the ones that were created by OSHA and NIOSH. There are other ones that have been adopted by different organizations, but they all kind of run similar to this, and they're just ways to ensure that worker gradually works up to the ability to being able to work at their highest capacity. And again, 100%, even when you look at that for the new workers, when you look at that 4 or 5 days, 100% doesn't mean that they can dig 9 miles of ditches in 100-degree heat with 80% humidity. No one can, well, I'm sure someone can, but that's not reasonable of anyone. But being able to ramp up that worker and take that time that's necessary will help to eliminate or mitigate that risk of them succumbing to that heat injury within those first 2 or 3 weeks of being on the job. And experienced workers returning, this could be returning from a vacation, it could be returning from an illness, returning from an injury, whatever that is. If they haven't been in that situation, kind of treat them sort of as that new worker and allow them the time to build up that stamina again for working in the high heat. And that is something that should really be part of everyone's program, having that acclimation and having that time dedicated to ramp up to work. Other administrative controls, and these are ones that, again, form that preventative measure. What are we going to do to prevent those high stress, heat stress injuries from occurring in the first place? So rest and shade. Am I providing an area? It could be under a canopy, under a tree. It could be in the cab of a vehicle that's air conditioned. What makes sense? What am I going to do to get people out of that direct sunlight and provide them a respite from those high heat conditions? Are my rests and shade long enough? And this is something that can be determined both by the area where you're working and also the conditions that you're providing. I visited an auto parts warehouse, and it was a very large warehouse, and it was on a coast. And the day that I went, it was very hot and very humid. It just slapped you in the face the minute that you walked out into the warehouse from any kind of an air conditioned area. And they actually determined that for their employees, they were going to work for 40 minutes and rest for 20. And they did that consistently throughout the workday because the conditions were just so torturous that was what they felt was best for their workers. And they were able to do the 20 minutes as opposed to 30 minutes because they had cafeterias and rest areas that were air conditioned. And that really helped them to cool their core temperatures in a more progressive manner than if they just had a rest area that was in the shade. They determined that it was worth it to have those air conditioned areas and do those 20-minute breaks as opposed to just having a rest area that would really add 10 minutes to the break time because people wouldn't be able to get their core back to a normal temperature as quickly. So what are those conditions? What is reasonable for you? What can you accommodate within those breaks to get everybody's core back down to a normal level and allow them to still be productive within those rest work cycles? What can we do to modify our schedules? Do we need to rotate workers more often? Do we need to bring on more workers so that the work can be shared among a greater number of people to create those safer conditions? What are we going to do to stop work? When is it too hot for us to perform whatever duties or whatever tasks we need to do? When can we schedule this work? Can we do this work at a time, maybe during the evening when it's cooler? What are those things that we need to do to keep people safe? Again, providing water, looking at what we can do to eliminate people rushing or people trying to overperform to meet a specification. Prohibiting overtime is sometimes hard, especially when you're looking at, okay, we can only do 50% of our tasks. We're going to have to provide overtime. But as people look at that and they look at that as a way to secure income for themselves or their families, are they putting themselves at risks? By prohibiting overtime, we can help to manage that a little better by saying, okay, you know what? We can only get half the work done. That's going to have to be good enough, or we're going to have to bring in more workers or whatever the case may be, so that we are not putting people at risk and they're not overworking just to make that extra money. Hydration is so important. And this is something that we should calculate before we even send people into the field. We've got 100 workers. That means we need 4 cups of water for each of them for each hour. If they're working for 8 hours, we need to do the math to make sure that we've got enough water for them to drink and enough water that is palatable for them. So we can't be sticking the water out in the middle of the field and letting it get warm all day. How are we going to keep that water cool? How are we going to make sure that people are taking advantage of that and hydrating as they need? A note here on electrolyte drinks. Electrolyte drinks are something that we hear a lot about when we're talking about hydration and when we're talking about heat stress. That is something that you may need to consider. Something perhaps at lunchtime, you're providing those drinks to help people rebalance. Certainly not something that needs to be there at the beginning of the day. If people are coming to work properly hydrated, you don't need to necessarily supplement them in the beginning of the day, but throughout the day, as people sweat and as people are subjected to those higher conditions, that may be something to consider at lunchtime or as the day progresses. So what do you need to do to help keep people hydrated throughout the day? Other administrative controls. So looking at those rest breaks, where do they need to be? Here we see a guy who's just resting in the cab of his truck, air conditioned so he can get cooler faster, and making sure that people take that break, even if they say that they don't need it, they don't want to, even just resting for 5 minutes can really make a difference in that heat stress and controlling those situations. Other things. So these are recommendations from OSHA, is to provide shade whenever the temperature is 80 degrees or above. So 80 degrees is kind of that minimum marker that they're looking at when the temperature gets above that. And again, that's just the temperature. That's not looking at heat index, but looking at having that accommodation so that people have a respite from being in that direct sunlight and somewhere that they can go. Looking at making those rest areas that are desirable to go to. You can't expect 100 people to shelter under a tent. It's going to be hotter under the tent than it would be outside. So are those accommodations reasonable, and are they something that people can access readily? If you've got one rest area for something that's 3,000 acres, that's not reasonable. So making those areas something that people can get to in a reasonable amount of time, in a reasonable fashion, is going to be what OSHA is looking for. Also looking at those high heat conditions. Do you have supervisors, managers, people appointed to really just be observing workers, looking for those people who are showing those signs of heat stress, making sure that everybody has had some water and has had rest, and they're taking those cool down cycles seriously, and they're not overworking themselves to the point where they are succumbing to those high heat stress conditions. And finally, as we go down the hierarchy of controls, looking at PPE. Is there PPE available that could help these workers? And you see here, this is a headband. They're the kind that you soak in water so that they provide that cooling evaporative effect. Something that works well in dry conditions, but may not work as well if it's very humid outside. There are a lot of air cooled garments. There are actually suits now that have little air conditioning units kind of built into them. There's a lot of technology that's available to help workers keep their core cooler. And some of that may help you with your workforce, may help them to stay in a situation longer, especially if they're wearing a lot of heavy PPE that is very bulky and doesn't allow the body to sweat normally or to evaporate that sweat naturally. They may be things that you could incorporate into your plans to help minimize that hazard. Training is something that we've got the plan together, we've got the procedures in place. If we don't communicate those things, it doesn't make sense to necessarily have that plan in place. So what are we going to do to teach people how to mitigate this hazard and what the expectations are to keep everyone safe? And this training is important for not only the employees, but also for the supervisors, because the supervisors are the ones who are looking at the work that needs to be performed, looking at schedules, looking at the need to take those breaks, looking at the need to monitor workers. What are the things that we need to teach them in order to make this plan productive, in order to make this plan successful, so that we don't have those high stress conditions that are creating injuries within our workforce? So what are we going to task them with? Are they going to be in charge of the break schedule? Are they going to be in charge of hydration? How are they going to buddy people up? What do we need to do? What do we need to teach them in order for this plan to be successful? And then, of course, the employees. We need to teach them about acclimation. We need to teach them about the expectations. We need to teach them about the importance of taking that break. we all want to be that good worker. We all want to be the person who is able to check that box and perform all the tasks. But how are we going to do that safely? And what do we need to look for when we're out there? What are we looking for in ourselves? What are we looking for in the employees or the buddies that we're working with? What are those signs and symptoms of heat-related illnesses? What do I need to do if I suspect that somebody is succumbing to a heat-related illness? And actually, what do I need to do for first aid to help that person if they are succumbing to that heat illness? But focusing on the different things that we're going to do to protect you in that situation. So finally, wrapping up some of the plans that your questions should answer, and these are the questions that OSHA has given to their compliance officers. So when they're out enforcing this standard and when they're out at a work site and they're looking for signs that you do have a plan in place, what are they going to be asking, or what are they going to be observing within the workplace? So first one, who provides oversight on your work site? Is it a supervisor? Is it a manager? Do you use management in a buddy system? What is your plan? What is your procedure for making sure that people are staying safe in these high heat conditions? What engineering controls and practices are in place? What are you doing to minimize that hazard? So are you using fans? Are you using tents? Do you have hydration? What are those things that you're doing to minimize the heat hazard? How are you determining if total heat stress is hazardous? So are you using the app? You don't have to, but what are you using to determine that heat index? Are you using the wet bulb globe temperature? Are you using an app? Are you using the National Weather Service forecast in the morning? What is that determining factor to determine what those triggers are and what you're going to do? Are you acclimating people? Do you have proof of acclimatization? Do you have work rest schedules for those new people? What is it that you're doing to acclimate people who are either new or who are returning to the situation? How are you measuring heat stress? Are you using that heat index? Are you using wet bulb globe? What is the indicator that you're using for that? Have you done training? Are your employees aware of symptoms of heat stress? Are your supervisors aware of that? Have they established break schedules? So are they using that training, and are they putting it into place? Is there first aid available? What are you going to do if there is an emergency? Do you have a communication line? Do you have the ability to get an ambulance there? Do you have the ability to get people to emergency services or to a hospital? And what are your policies for work when there are those super high conditions, when that heat index is above 103, when it reaches 115? What are you going to do to stop work or minimize those potentials for people to succumb to heat injuries? So some of the things that those plans should answer, and again, looking at what you are doing in those situations. Have you identified your risk? Is your plan realistic? Is it sufficient to make sure that those high heat situations are not causing a risk to your employees? What have you done to communicate your plan? Have you done the training? Do you use those moments in your tailgates to just reinforce that, to look at the heat index and set those expectations? And are you providing those rest areas, the shade that people need to get out of the hot sun, and the fluids to make sure that they are hydrating, and doing those preventative things to prevent those heat stress injuries from happening in the first place? With that, I'd like to thank you all again for your time. We do have the chat feature. If you have any questions, I would love to take them at this time. Let's give that a check and see if anybody has questions. I see a question coming at this time, so we'll wait for that. So looking at the heat ramping up, I know in Pennsylvania, we've got some hot, humid conditions today, and I see those happening throughout the country with a lot of utilities. How will this information be available on YouTube? Okay, so this recording will be on our YouTube channel. So if you're on YouTube, just search HalenHardy and it will be available there. We will also be sending an email with a recording. This webinar will also be posted on our website as well. So if you look at our blog section, we have a section that has all of our webinars, and it's available there for you at any time. And if you would like a certificate for attendance at this webinar today, there will also be a link for that in the email that we send you after the webinar. Are there any other questions? Okay, with that, I will throw up some contact information here for us. Again, my name is Karen Hamel, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have on this or other safety or environmental topics. And for any ordering information, Troy and Mike are available to help you with that. Thanks again for your time this day, and hope to see you all again soon on another webinar. Have a great day.